The VA ferry fleet drifted through the cold emptiness like a predator grown fat and lazy on too many easy kills. Dozens of warships, their hulls ridged with ceremonial scars from past conquests, hung in disciplined formation. Inside the command chamber of the flagship, Admiral Sereth Kale lounged in his acceleration throne, eyes half-lidded, mandibles clicking in faint irritation. Another raid. Another weak colony. Another round of pomp and reports that meant nothing. His officers barked status updates with mechanical precision, but their voices carried the same undercurrent he felt: boredom. Humanity's frontier outposts had fallen one after another, each a trivial struggle at best. What use was all their proud history, their stubborn resistance, if the weight of the VA ferry war machine could reduce them to ash with so little effort? A junior navigator projected a holographic chart above the deck. A sweep of stars color-coded by control, Viatory red stretching across half the known spiral arm, rival polities marked in pale blues and greens, and then, at the edge, a dull gray zone where humanity lay. Nothing past it. No rival species mapped beyond human-controlled space. Just blankness. As always, the navigator droned, the galactic map ends at the human frontier. Beyond this, no star maps exist. The officers laughed. Someone muttered that humans probably feared to venture further. Another suggested that the void beyond was cursed, which drew even louder laughter. Kale allowed himself a small smile, though he did not join their chorus. He had heard this same joke 100 times. Every campaign briefing carried the same hollow note: the map ends here. And yet, he thought, the cartographers never seemed eager to test that edge themselves. Enough, Kale said at last, and the chamber stilled. His voice, smooth and resonant, carried authority. Our task is not to debate star myths. We are to strike the solar system itself. Humanity's homeworld will fall. After that, their morale collapses and the war ends. He said it as though he believed it entirely. But some quiet place in him wondered if war with humans was ever so simple. Their colonies had fallen quickly, yes, but the humans themselves rarely begged. They resisted even in futility, striking from shadows, fighting until oxygen ran dry. Kale, who had studied war his entire life, recognized that trait for what it was: dangerous. Still, he silenced the thought and waved a claw for the navigator to continue. Orders were orders, and he had no wish to seem hesitant. The jump to Sol was uneventful. The fleet emerged in a shimmer of light near the orbit of Saturn, weapons armed, shields blazing. Kale leaned forward. For all their reputation, the humans had left nothing here to meet him. No fleet, no defense grid, only a scattering of civilian satellites that fizzled into debris under token fire. Pathetic, his first officer sneered. This is their home system. Kale said nothing. He watched the holographic rendering of the system expand. 8 planets, an asteroid belt, countless moons. Humanity's cradle. Their entire species spread from this one fragile world. Conquering Earth itself should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt too easy. The fleet advanced. Jupiter slipped behind them, then Mars. They cut through the void toward the pale blue sphere ahead. Kale's eyes lingered on Earth, luminous against the black. The planet looked insignificant, fragile, yet stubbornly alive. The comms officer reported no resistance, no transmissions, no scrambling fleets. Earth appeared defenseless. It unsettled him. Perhaps they have abandoned their cradle, one officer said, almost hopeful. They run like prey, another added. Kale tasted dry humor on his tongue. Prey does not always run, he murmured, but kept the words low, meant for himself. The order to close on Earth was given. The fleet accelerated, engines thundering in unison. At last, as the planet grew vast on their displays, a signal broke through the silence. It was not frantic. It was not defiant. It was not desperate. The voice was calm. Human, unmistakably human. This is Earth Command, it said. No bluster, no rage. Just measured words. You were warned not to cross here. The chamber froze. Officers glanced at one another, confusion replacing arrogance. Kale felt his throat tighten. The transmission had the quality of a judgment, not a plea. Then the strikes began. At first, the VA ferry thought it was a malfunction, ships winking out of formation, sensor readings collapsing. But no alarms had sounded. No energy signatures preceded the hits. One moment, a destroyer was present. The next, its hull was splitting apart under unseen bombardment. Shields are failing on the Krithel, someone shouted. Another ship vanished from a tactical display, torn into shrapnel by a kinetic slug that seemed to arrive faster than light itself. Panic rippled across the bridge. Where are they firing from? There are no signatures. The calm voice spoke again, overriding the chaos. You were given every chance to leave us be. You did not listen. Kale's mandibles clenched tight. He ordered evasive maneuvers, but the pattern repeated. VA-30 cruisers destroyed one after another, precision strikes carving holes through their ranks. Each hit was surgical, deliberate. This was not desperation. This was preparation. The officers who had laughed earlier were now pale with fear, their voices breaking as they reported the losses. Kale sat rigid, staring at the screen as Earth loomed closer. Somewhere in his chest, unease crystallized into understanding. The humans had been waiting. And as another comm message rolled across the fleet, engagement complete. Adjusting targets. Kale realized with a sudden, chilling clarity that the reason the galactic map ended at human space was not because humanity was afraid to go beyond. It was because everyone else had been wise enough not to come in. The VA-30 admiral leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the burning wreckage of his fleet. The silence in the command chamber was no longer boredom. It was terror, sharp and suffocating. And Kale, for the first time in his career, did not know if he would live to give another order. Admiral Sareth Kale had always trusted in the weight of numbers. 1,000 ships against 100, and the outcome was assured. Yet here, above the fragile blue planet, that arithmetic had been shattered. His fleet, disciplined, proud, forged through centuries of conquest, was being unmade by an enemy that did not even raise its voice. The silence gnawed at him. VA-30 war doctrine depended on spectacle, on overwhelming firepower that crushed not only bodies but hope. The humans offered none of that. No war songs, no triumphant declarations. Only calm, measured words delivered without passion, engagement complete. Adjusting targets. That stillness was worse than mockery. It was indifference. Kale forced his officers to regain composure. Stabilize the line. Identify their firing positions. His commands were sharp, but his eyes betrayed unease. Sensors showed nothing, no ships, no energy surges, no traceable vectors. The strikes simply appeared, precise as a surgeon's scalpel, dismantling ships as though they had been marked long before the battle began. He thought of the colonies they had taken, their feeble defenses, their desperate resistance. Could those worlds have been bait? The possibility chilled him. Every engagement now looked different through that lens. The humans had been recording, studying, learning. And the VA-30, arrogant in their victories, had given them everything. Another cruiser flared and died, hull breached by an impact that should not have been possible. Kale's mandibles clicked together in a rhythm he could not suppress, a habit he had buried long ago when he first wore the Admiral's crest. He realized with something close to dread that he was nervous. Truly nervous. "Admiral," his first officer rasped, voice shaking, "we cannot hold this position. We should retreat." Retreat from prey. Kale's reply was automatic, more reflex than conviction. But even as he said it, he felt the hollowness. They were not fighting prey. They were fighting something he no longer understood. The human spoke again. This time the voice was female, level, almost gentle. "We warned you for decades. Do you think we were joking?" The officers exchanged glances. Some hissed curses. Others lowered their eyes. Kale kept his gaze locked on Earth, luminous and silent. That world had always seemed insignificant, yet it now radiated a gravity far beyond mass. It was not merely a planet. It was a trapdoor the VA-30 had stepped through willingly, blind to the abyss beneath. He ordered the fleet to scatter, hoping to force the humans to divide their focus. Yet even scattered, the attacks followed, each ship cut down as though the humans already knew where they would flee. Kale could feel the shape of a noose tightening. He wondered if the humans had planned this years in advance, building a net invisible to VA-30 sensors, waiting for the day arrogance would draw them too close. His comms officer broke the silence. "Admiral, there's another transmission. Not open band. Directed only to you." Kale hesitated, then gestured for it to play. The screen flickered, and a human face appeared. A man, weathered, stern, eyes calm in a way that unsettled Kale more than rage ever could. He wore no armor, no ornament. Only a plain uniform marked with the insignia of Earth Command. "Admiral Kale," the human said, speaking his name flawlessly. "We know who you are. You've commanded campaigns against our colonies for years. This ends now." Kale leaned forward. You dare address me so casually? Do you know what empire you challenge? The man's expression did not change. We know exactly what you are. Empires rise and fall. Species think themselves eternal until history proves otherwise. You should have stayed on your side of the map. Kale's jaw tightened. He wanted to retort, to summon the venom of his station, but the man's tone robbed the words of power before they formed. There was no malice here. No anger. Just certainty. Your fleets are already lost, the human continued. We studied you. Every tactic, every formation, every weakness. You thought our colonies were prey. They were mirrors. They showed us who you are. Kale swallowed bitterness. Mirrors. Yes, he saw it now. Each conquered outpost had not been a defeat for humanity, but a test. They had bled willingly, let themselves be dissected, all so they could build the scalpel now carving through his fleet. Why? Kale demanded, though the question sounded smaller than he intended. Why hide such power until now? The man's eyes darkened, but his voice remained steady. Because we hope never to use it. But your kind would not stop. You forced our hand. And when humanity is forced, Admiral, it does not unclench until the threat is gone. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in silence once more. Kale exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of every officer's stare. They had heard. They understood. Fear, once a faint current, now saturated the air. He tried to summon the image of the Vietheri banner, the endless red stretching across the stars, but the image rang hollow against the memory of that calm human face. For the first time, Kale wondered if his empire's arrogance had finally found the predator greater than itself. Another wave of precision strikes slammed through the fleet. Kale did not flinch. Instead, he sat rigid, forcing his voice steady. Pull back what remains. Regroup at the edge of the system. We will not die in their trap. His first officer obeyed, though the order carried no promise of safety. Ships reeled back, engines blazing, but the humans did not pursue. They allowed the remnants to retreat, as though they were already irrelevant. That indifference burned worse than loss. Kale studied Earth one last time as it shrank on the display. The planet had not moved, had not shifted, had not flinched. And yet it had turned his invasion into wreckage. The central conflict was no longer unclear. It was not a war of numbers or ships. It was a war of patience, of resolve, of history itself. The Vietheri believed themselves masters of domination. Humanity had just revealed mastery of something far more dangerous, restraint. They had hidden their teeth until the moment of necessity, and when they bit, it was with precision that shattered the illusion of Vietheri's superiority. As the fleet limped toward the outer edge of the system, Kale sat in silence, hearing again the words that had begun this disaster. You were warned not to cross here. Warnings that had sounded like weakness now carried the weight of prophecy. The Admiral's gaze lingered on the stars beyond Earth. He could not shake the thought that the humans had planned not only for this battle, but for what came after. The map had ended at their frontier, but perhaps that too had been a choice. Not absence, but warning. Kale understood now why no one asked the reason. Because to ask was to risk hearing the answer. And he feared he had just heard it. Admiral Sereth Kale could not remember a time when silence felt this heavy. The survivors of his fleet drifted at the edge of the Sol system, scarred and diminished, engines burning low, as though even the machines feared to draw attention. No pursuit followed. No final strike came. Humanity had cut them down with terrifying precision, then simply stopped. That deliberate mercy weighed heavier than annihilation. Kale sat in his quarters, reviewing what remained of his logs. Each engagement reappeared in merciless detail. Vietheri ships torn apart by invisible weapons, officers shouting into static, the calm voice of Earth Command repeating phrases as unshakable as scripture. He replayed one segment again and again, the words echoing in his mind. You should have stayed on your side of the map. It was not a threat. It was a truth. The door chimed, and his first officer entered, mandibles tight, eyes avoiding direct contact. Admiral, the High Council demands immediate testimony. They say explanations are required. Kale gave a bitter laugh, low and sharp. Explanations. They want excuses. They want their arrogance reinforced, not the truth. Still, duty chained him. Hours later, he stood in the vast chamber of the Vietheri High Council, a cathedral of power, where banners draped from walls and holographic starfields stretched across the ceiling. Dozens of counselors ringed him, their voices rising in accusation even before he began to speak. You lost 2/3 of your fleet, one barked. You allowed prey to humiliate the Empire, another sneered. Kale kept his composure, though each word cut. What I faced was no prey. Humanity is not what we believed. Their colonies were not weak holds, they were mirrors. They let us see only what they wished. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, half mocking, half uneasy. A counselor slammed a claw against the table. Superstition. They bled like any other. You overstate their cunning to excuse your failures. Kale's voice hardened. Then explain how they struck without signatures. Explain how they dismantled ships at will, predicted our maneuvers before we made them. Explain how they knew my name. That silenced the chamber for a breath. Kale pressed on. They were ready. Not by chance, not by desperation. By design. For decades, perhaps longer. We thought them backward. They were preparing. The council erupted into argument, voices layering in a cacophony of fear and denial. Some demanded immediate mobilization of the full armada. Others dismissed Kale's warnings as the panic of a disgraced commander. A few, too few, sat in uneasy silence, eyes dark with thought. Kale watched them, and his mandibles clenched. He could see the same arrogance that had blinded them for centuries, the same hubris that had driven them to expand without question. Now it chained them, keeping them from seeing the abyss at their feet. Enough, the high speaker boomed at last, silencing the chamber. His voice carried the weight of centuries of dominance. Admiral Kale, you speak of humans as if they are gods. They are not. The Va have broken empires greater than theirs. We will do so again. Kale met the speaker's gaze without flinching. I have studied empires, speaker. I have crushed resistance in a dozen systems. But I have never faced a species that hides its strength until the moment of necessity. Humanity is not reckless. They are deliberate. They do not fight for conquest, but for survival. And survival makes them relentless. The speaker leaned forward, voice dripping with disdain. And what do you suggest? That we surrender to primitives? That we bow to prey? A hush fell. All eyes turned to Kale. For a moment, he considered silence the safer path. But he had seen Earth's calm face, heard the weight behind their words. Lies would buy nothing. I suggest, he said slowly, each word deliberate, that we reconsider our war. Humanity is not prey. They are a predator we have awakened. If we continue, we risk not just defeat, but extinction. Gasps rippled through the chamber. One counselor spat a curse, another shouted for Kale's removal. The speaker raised a hand, silencing them again. Fear has broken you, Admiral. You would spread your weakness to us. That is unacceptable. Kale's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to shake them into understanding, but he saw the futility. Their ears were closed, their eyes blinded by pride. He had expected anger. He had not expected pity for them for their ignorance. Later, in the shadows of his quarters, Kale replayed human war records stolen from a captured colony. He had never truly studied them before, dismissing them as primitive struggles. Now he watched with new eyes. Trenches filled with mud and blood. Cities reduced to ash. Bombs that erased horizons. Soldiers fighting street by street, never yielding. He watched nuclear fire consume islands, watched men and women fight in deserts, jungles, oceans, refusing surrender even in hopelessness. He realized with a sinking dread that the humans had always been this way. Their wars were not accidents of history. They were the marrow of their existence. And now, for the first time in millennia, that marrow had turned outward. Kale closed the files, the images lingering like ghosts. His officers avoided his gaze in the corridors, whispering that he was broken. Perhaps he was. Yet he felt sharper than ever, as though the fog of arrogance had been burned from his mind. He could see the shape of the conflict now, and it terrified him. The Va would not listen. They would march forward, blind and proud, until humanity struck again. And when they did, the cost would be more than fleets. It would be the Empire itself. Kale stood at the viewport, watching the stars. Once he had looked at them and seen only conquest. Now he saw something else, limits. The map ended at human space, not because humans feared to cross it, but because others had learned not to. He whispered to the void, though no one was there to hear, we should have listened. Behind him, the council prepared their next campaign. He could already hear the rumblings of new orders, the rallying cries of those too blind to see the cliff before them. The conflict was no longer between Va and human. It was between truth and arrogance, between those who understood and those who refused. Kale straightened, his reflection caught in the viewport. He no longer recognized the man who had entered Seoul with arrogance heavy in his bones. That man had believed in numbers, in spectacle, in the inevitability of empire. The one staring back at him now knew better. The war was not over. It had barely begun. The sky above the VA Ferry capital was a lattice of crimson banners and orbital stations. Admiral Sereth Kale stood beneath them, his posture rigid, his thoughts coiled tight. The High Council had ignored his warnings. They had proclaimed that the humans' resistance was a mere anomaly, that the Empire's weight could still crush any defiance. Now, Kale awaited the consequences of their blindness with the calm of a man who had already glimpsed the inevitable. When the first wormhole tore open beyond the system's edge, there was no fanfare. It appeared silently, a wound in the stars. Then another, and another. A dozen openings, each disgorging human vessels that seemed too small to matter, too scattered to pose a threat. Counselors watching from their balconies laughed at the sight, mocking the audacity of prey that dared to carry war into the Empire's heart. Kale did not laugh. His mandibles locked, and his breath came slow. He had seen this pattern before. They would not strike like conquerors. They would strike like surgeons. The first VA Ferry fleet launched to intercept. It never returned. Reports arrived in fragments. Ships dismantled mid-maneuver, command crafts split apart before their orders reached subordinates. Kale could picture it clearly, the humans using precision to hollow out the structure of the fleet until it collapsed under its own weight. And while the Council clamored for explanations, more wormholes flared until the system itself looked riddled with scars. Kale demanded command of the defense. His request was granted not from trust, but from desperation. He walked into the command chamber and found it humming with fear disguised as duty. Officers barked orders, but their eyes betrayed doubt. Kale's voice cut through the din, low but steady. They are not here to battle for glory. They are here to end the fight before it begins. Do not seek to overwhelm them. Anticipate nothing. React to everything. The words steadied some, but not enough. When the humans struck, it was as Kale expected, with terrifying restraint. No wasted fire, no sweeping barrages. Their drones appeared where defenses were weakest, their rail slugs cracked open ships before shields could cycle. Even when VA Ferry squadrons managed to regroup, their attacks fell against shadows, decoys, projections, bait designed to lure them into traps. Kale's command vessel shook as a kinetic slug grazed its flank. He gripped the arms of his chair, but did not flinch. Maintain formation. They want us to scatter. His officers obeyed, clinging to his calm as though it were a lifeline. For hours they resisted, not winning but refusing to collapse. Yet Kale knew resistance alone was meaningless. The humans had not unleashed their full force. They were holding back, waiting for the moment to strike the Empire's will itself. That moment came when Earth Command transmitted again. The same human face Kale had seen at Seoul appeared across every channel, broadcast into the heart of the Empire. His voice was level, each word spoken with the cadence of final judgment. We offered peace. We endured your raids. We endured your arrogance. You brought war to our homeworld, and so you will learn what war means to us. Across the chamber, counselors watching the broadcast paled. Citizens in the streets below froze before public screens. The words carried not rage, but certainty, and in that certainty was terror. Kale understood. This was the human's greatest weapon. Not technology, not tactics, but conviction sharpened into inevitability. The climax unfolded with ruthless precision. Human fleets surged not toward military targets, but communication hubs, orbital relays, symbols of VA Ferry control. They did not seek annihilation. They sought collapse. One by one, the arteries of the Empire's command structure were severed, leaving its fleets thrashing, without coherence. Kale listened as reports dwindled into silence, until only his vessel remained standing at the edge of the capital. He could have fought to the last. He could have thrown his ship into a futile charge, dying as a symbol of defiance. But as he stared at the glowing sphere of the human wormholes surrounding the system, he felt the futility of such gestures. Humanity would not be moved by symbolic death. They would continue until the Empire itself yielded. Kale gave the order to cease fire. His officers stared at him, stunned. Admiral, the Council. The Council is already dead, Kale replied. His voice was quiet but absolute. They killed themselves when they chose arrogance over survival. Silence held the chamber. Then the transmissions came. not from visionary fleets, but from planetary governors, vassal states, colonies long resentful of imperial rule. They declared surrender to humanity in rapid succession, preferring submission to the unknown predator rather than loyalty to a dying empire. The collapse was not military. It was psychological, and it spread faster than fire. When the battle ended, there was no cheer. Human vessels remained at the edge of the system, their guns quiet, their stance measured. The same human voice returned, offering not conquest, but terms. We do not seek revenge. We seek order. Lay down your arms, and you will live. Resist, and you will be erased. Choose. Kale bowed his head. There was no choice. He transmitted surrender, his voice carrying the weight of an empire's fall. Humanity did not gloat. They simply acknowledged, then began to withdraw, leaving only the certainty that they could return whenever they wished. Days later, Kale was summoned not to execution but to a new council, one convened by humanity itself. He expected humiliation. Instead, he was offered something stranger, a role. Humanity did not want a shattered empire. They wanted intermediaries, stability, a bridge between conquerors and conquered. Kale was to be that bridge. The irony cut deep. He who had once seen humans as prey now lived at their mercy, tasked with helping his people adapt to a galaxy that would never again be theirs to dominate. Yet beneath the humiliation was a flicker of something unexpected. Relief. At least his people would live. On his final night before assuming the role, Kale stood once more at a viewport, gazing at the stars. The banners of the Vietheri no longer flew. In their place was silence, heavy but alive. He thought of the maps he had studied, of how they always ended a human space, and he finally understood. The map had not lied. It had warned. No one had asked why because no one had wished to hear the answer. Now the galaxy knew. Humanity had awakened, and they would not return to sleep. Kale whispered into the quiet, not sure if he hoped the humans would hear. We should have listened. We all should have listened. The stars did not reply. They simply burned, waiting for what humanity would do next.